Ernest Morris was 34 years old, and 3 months ago he made a decision that destroyed his marriage but saved his life. He sat in his car outside the townhouse in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina, rehearsing the lie he was about to tell his wife. "Kelly, I got fired today." 5 words, simple, but those 5 words would shatter the illusion he'd been living in for the past 4 years. Ernest wasn't some paranoid husband looking for problems. He had a solid job as a senior marketing manager at a regional health care company, pulling in around 92,000 a year. His wife, Kelly, worked part-time as a yoga instructor, maybe 15 hours a week. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. They had a modest 2-bedroom townhouse, took a vacation to the coast once a year, and split the bills down the middle like a modern couple should. Or so he thought. The truth was Ernest had started noticing things, small things at first. The way Kelly would tense up whenever he mentioned his mother visiting, how she'd suddenly become obsessed with their financial accounts, asking detailed questions about his 401k and life insurance policies, the way she'd started going out more with her friend Jessica, coming home later and later with vague explanations about night outs and networking events. But the real red flag came 2 weeks ago. Ernest had come home early from work with a migraine, something that rarely happened. As he'd walked through the front door, he'd heard Kelly's voice drifting from the kitchen, sharp and animated in a way she never was with him anymore. "I'm telling you, Jess, I just need to wait it out a little longer. Once we hit that 5-year mark, the alimony calculation changes completely." My lawyer said she'd stopped mid-sentence when she heard his footsteps. When Ernest entered the kitchen, Kelly had been standing by the counter, phone pressed to her ear, face flushed. She'd quickly wrapped up the call with a breezy, "Yeah, okay, see you at class tomorrow," and smiled at him like nothing was wrong. "Didn't expect you home so early," she'd said, her voice just a touch too bright. Ernest had played it off, mentioning the migraine, taking some ibuprofen and retreating to the bedroom. But that overheard fragment had burrowed into his brain like a parasite. 5-year mark, alimony calculation, my lawyer. They'd been married for 4 years and 7 months. For the next 2 weeks, Ernest had watched his wife with new eyes. He'd noticed how she'd pull away when he tried to kiss her, offering her cheek instead of her lips. How she'd stopped asking about his day at work, barely looking up from her phone during dinner. How she'd moved some of her clothes into the guest room closet, claiming she needed more space. And then there were the financial things. Kelly had started pushing him to add her name to his investment account, the one he'd built up before they'd even met. She'd brought it up 3 times in the past month, framing it as being a real team and showing trust. When Ernest had hesitated, she'd gotten cold, giving him the silent treatment for 2 days. That's when Ernest had decided to run a test. If you enjoy stories of deep betrayal and shocking revelations about the people we trust most, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one. And tell me where you are watching from. Ernest had consulted with his own attorney first, a sharp woman named Patricia Morrison, who'd handled his friend's divorce 2 years ago. He'd laid out everything he'd observed, every suspicion, every overheard word. Patricia had leaned back in her office chair, fingers steepled, and given him a long, measured look. "What you're describing is called strategic positioning," she'd said. "If your wife is planning to file for divorce, she's likely been advised to wait until you cross that 5-year threshold. In North Carolina, that can significantly impact alimony duration and calculations. So, what do I do?" Ernest had asked, his stomach churning. "You need proof." Patricia had replied, "Suspicions won't protect you, but if you can document that she's planning to leave and is only staying for financial benefit, that can affect the settlement negotiations. Sometimes people reveal Their true intentions when they think the money is gone. That conversation had led to this moment. Ernest sitting in his car about to walk into his own home and tell a calculated lie. He'd set up his phone to record audio in his pocket. League record vacon check on you to say for C what is ONVERSATIONS. He was PART of, and as pessispable long as the phone was on his person. Even conversations he overheard in his own home could be documented. Ernest took a deep breath and walked inside. Kelly was in the living room, curled up on the couch with her laptop, probably scrolling through social media or texting. She looked up when he entered, and he saw the briefest flash of annoyance cross her face before she rearranged it into something resembling concern. "You're home early," she said, echoing those same words from 2 weeks ago. Ernest set his briefcase down, making sure his movements looked heavy. Defeated. "Kelly, we need to talk. Something happened at work today." She closed her laptop and he could see the weariness in her eyes. "What is it?" "I got fired," Ernest said, letting his voice crack slightly. "They called me into HR this morning. Budget cuts. They're eliminating my entire department. I'm out effective immediately." For a split second, Kelly's face went completely blank. Then, in rapid succession, Ernest watched her cycle through emotions: shock, confusion, and something else. Something that looked almost like panic. You got fired." Her voice was higher than usual. "But you've been there for 6 years. How can they just? It doesn't matter how they can." Ernest interrupted, playing his part. "The point is, it's done. We're going to have to make some serious changes, Kelly. I've got maybe 3 months of severance, and then we're living on your yoga income and whatever unemployment I can get. We might have to sell the townhouse, move somewhere cheaper." He watched her face drain of color. "Sell the house, Ernest. We can't just. We might not have a choice." He pressed on. "And that investment account I have, I'm probably going to need to drain it to cover our expenses while I look for a new job. The market's terrible right now for marketing positions. Could take 6 months or more to find something." Kelly stood up abruptly. I need to process this. This is a lot." "I know it's a shock," Ernest said. "I'm pretty devastated myself," she nodded, but she wasn't looking at him anymore. Her eyes had that distant, calculating look he'd seen more and more lately. "I'm going to call Jessica. I just need to talk to someone. Is that okay?" "Of course," Ernest said softly. "I'll be in the study if you need me." Kelly grabbed her phone and hurried upstairs to their bedroom, closing the door behind her. Ernest waited 30 seconds, then quietly climbed the stairs, positioning himself just outside the bedroom door. His phone was still recording in his pocket. He heard Kelly's frantic whisper almost immediately. "Jess, we have a serious problem. Ernest just told me he got fired." "No, I'm not kidding. I know, but this changes everything. If he's not employed, the alimony calculation is going to be based on unemployment and whatever crappy job he finds next. I could end up with nothing." Ernest's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his breathing quiet, listening. "What do you mean?" "Wait it out," Kelly hissed. "We're 7 months away from the 5-year mark. You think I can live with him pretending everything's fine for 7 more months while he's unemployed? And what if he doesn't find a good job by then? My lawyer said the calculation is based on his income at the time of separation." There was a pause as Jessica responded, "No, I can't just cut my losses and file now. 7 months of waiting would be wasted and I'd get almost nothing. We planned this carefully. Remember, wait until 5 years, then file. He has that investment account worth about 43,000 and his 401k has maybe 90,000 in it. Split that plus alimony based on his 92,000 salary for at least 3 years. Jess, we're talking about walking away with probably 200,000 total when you factor everything in. That was the plan." Ernest felt ice spread through his veins. She'd calculated it down to the dollar amounts. This wasn't a suspicion or a fear. This was a strategy, a business plan for ending their marriage. "What other choice do I have?" Kelly continued. "I could stay and hope he finds another high-paying job soon." "No, you're right," That's ridiculous. For all I know, he'll end up in some $60,000 job, and I'll have waited all this time for half of that. Maybe I should just file now and take what I can get. At least the 401k is still substantial. She paused again, and when she spoke next, her voice had dropped even lower. I know it seems cold, but you know what? I stopped loving him about a year ago, maybe longer. He's boring, Jess. He comes home, watches TV, talks about his boring work friends, goes to bed at 10:00 like he's 60 years old. I'm 31. I'm not spending the rest of my life like this. The money is it's what I'm owed for putting up with 4 years of mediocrity. Ernest had heard enough. He walked back downstairs on silent feet, his mind reeling. Kelly hadn't just been planning to leave him. She'd been actively calculating how to maximize her financial take. She'd stayed in a marriage she checked out of, waiting for the clock to run out on that 5-year mark like it was some kind of investment maturity date. They had no idea what was coming. Ernest went into the study and closed the door, pulling out his phone to stop the recording. His hands were shaking, but not from sadness, from rage. From the crystalline clarity of betrayal, he called Patricia Morrison. "I got it," he said when she answered. Every word. She laid out the whole plan. "Play it for me," Patricia said, her voice sharp and professional. Ernest played the recording, and he heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath halfway through. "This is even better than I hoped," she said when it finished. "Ernest, what she just described is called economic opportunism in divorce law. She's essentially admitted that she's staying in the marriage solely to increase her financial benefit. This recording could potentially eliminate or severely reduce any alimony claim." "What do I do now?" Ernest asked. "First, secure your assets. Tomorrow morning, go to the bank and move half the money from your joint accounts into a separate account in only your name. That's your legal right. Second, change your beneficiaries on your life insurance and 401k immediately. Third, we're going to file for divorce before she does, and we're going to include this recording as evidence of her mercenary intentions." File first. Ernest's mind was spinning. "Absolutely, we're going to catch her completely off guard. She thinks she has 7 more months to position herself. We're going to pull the rug out from under her this week." Ernest felt a grim smile cross his face. "Do one more thing," Patricia added. "Don't let on that you know anything. Can you keep up the act for a few more days?" "I can do whatever it takes," Ernest replied. That night, Kelly came downstairs around 8:00, her face carefully arranged into sympathetic concern. "Hey," she said softly, "I'm sorry I disappeared like that. This is just such shocking news." Ernest looked up from his laptop where he'd been pretending to browse job listings. "It's okay, I know it's scary." She sat down next to him and he felt her hand on his shoulder. The touch made his skin crawl, but he didn't flinch. "We'll figure it out," she said. "We're a team, right, for better or worse." The irony of those wedding vows coming out of her mouth almost made Ernest laugh, but he kept his face neutral and even managed to look grateful. "Thanks, Em. That means a lot." She smiled, and it looked so genuine that for a moment Ernest questioned everything. Could he have misunderstood? Could there be some explanation? Then she said, "You should probably start looking into how much unemployment you'll qualify for, and we should sit down and really look at our budget, figure out what we can cut." She was already calculating, already figuring out whether it was worth staying or cutting her losses. "I will," Ernest promised, "first thing tomorrow." Kelly stood up, stretching. "I'm going to take a bath and head to bed early. Today has been exhausting. Good night," Ernest said. He watched her walk away, and he felt nothing. No sadness, no longing, not even anger anymore. Just a cold, calm determination to make sure she didn't get away with what she'd planned. The next morning, Ernest got up at 6:00 before Kelly was awake. He went to the bank the moment it opened at 9 and moved $4.3 100, exactly half, from their joint savings account into a new individual account. He changed his $41K beneficiary from Kelly to his mother. He changed his life insurance beneficiary the same way. Then he went to Patricia Morrison's office to sign the divorce papers. "We're filing this afternoon," Patricia told him. "She'll be served with papers probably by Thursday. That gives you 2 days to prepare for her reaction." "What should I expect?" Ernest asked. Patricia smiled, and it wasn't particularly warm. Shock, anger, probably threats. She's going to realize that her entire strategy just collapsed. Women like Kelly, people like Kelly, she corrected herself, don't take well to having their plans disrupted. She thought she was in control. She was, Ernest admitted, until she wasn't. Ernest went home and continued his act. He applied to a few jobs online, making sure Kelly could see him doing it. He cooked dinner that night, pasta with marinara sauce. Nothing fancy, and they ate in near silence. "Any luck with the job search?" Kelly asked, her voice carefully casual. "Not yet," Ernest replied. "But I've only been looking for 2 days. These things take time." He nodded, pushing pasta around his plate. "How much severance did they give you exactly?" 3 months of salary, Ernest said, so about 23,000 before taxes. He saw her do the mental math, watched her face tighten. 23,000 wasn't enough to maintain their lifestyle for long, not if he wasn't working. She was running her own calculations, probably trying to figure out if she should just file now or wait. "That's not much," she said finally. "No," Ernest agreed, "it's not." Thursday afternoon, Ernest was at work, his actual job, where he'd never been fired at all, when his phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "She's been served. Papers were delivered at 2:47 p.m. Ernest stared at the message, his heart pounding. It was done, no going back now. He waited. His phone rang at 3:15 p.m. Kelly's name flashed on the screen. He let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello. What the hell is this?" Kelly's voice was shaking, but not with sadness, with fury. "I just got served with divorce papers. Ernest, what the hell is going on?" Ernest kept his voice calm. "I think the papers are pretty self-explanatory. Kelly, you can't just. We didn't even talk about this. You got fired 2 days ago and now you're divorcing me." "Actually," Ernest said, enjoying this more than he probably should, "I didn't get fired. I lied. I made the whole thing up." There was complete silence on the other end of the line. "What?" Kelly's voice was barely a whisper. "It was a test, Kelly, and you failed spectacularly." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do," Ernest interrupted. "You understand perfectly. I know about your plan. I know you've been waiting for the 5-year mark. I know you've been calculating alimony and asset splits. I know you stopped loving me a year ago, but stayed anyway for the money. How do you—" She stopped, and he could practically hear her mind racing. "You were listening that night. You listened to my phone call." "I did," Ernest confirmed. "And I recorded it, and my lawyer has that recording. So here's how this is going to go, Kelly. You're going to accept a very reasonable divorce settlement that doesn't include alimony, given that you've admitted you stayed in this marriage solely for financial gain. Or we can go to court, and I'll play that recording for a judge and let them decide how mercenary you really are." "You bastard," Kelly hissed. "You manipulative bastard," Ernest shot back. "Says the woman who calculated our marriage down to dollar amounts and investment account balances. You played a game, Kelly. You just didn't realize I knew I was playing too." She hung up on him. Ernest sat in his office, phone in hand, and felt something like peace settle over him. Patricia had been right. People reveal who they really are when they think the money is gone. Kelly had revealed herself completely. What Kelly didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Ernest's revelation was just beginning, and the consequences would be far more devastating than she could possibly imagine. The night after Kelly was served with divorce papers, Ernest didn't go home. He texted her that he was staying at his friend Marcus' place while they figured things out, which was partially true. Marcus had indeed offered his guest room, but Ernest wasn't hiding. He was strategizing. Patricia Morrison had been clear. The next few weeks would be critical. Kelly would likely consult her lawyer, regroup, and come back fighting. But Ernest had advantages now. The recording, the element of surprise, and most importantly, the truth. She's going to try to flip the narrative. Patricia had warned him during their meeting Friday morning. She'll claim she was venting to a friend, that you took things out of context, that you manipulated her with a cruel test. Be prepared for that. Ernest had nodded, but he wasn't worried. The recording was damning, yes, but it wasn't his only evidence. Over the past 2 weeks, since he'd first overheard Kelly's conversation, he'd been quietly documenting everything. Photographs of her moving clothes to the guest room, screenshots of her suddenly increased activity on a divorce support forum she thought was anonymous, credit card statements showing lunches with her attorney, charges for a family law firm in downtown Charlotte, dated back 3 months. Kelly had been planning this divorce since August. On Friday evening, Ernest finally returned to the townhouse. Kelly's car was in the driveway, and he could see lights on inside. He took a breath and walked in. She was sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of her, her laptop open. When she looked up at him, her eyes were red, rimmed but hard. "We need to talk," she said. "Okay." Ernest pulled out a chair and sat across from her, maintaining distance. Kelly folded her hands on the table. When she spoke, her voice was measured, controlled. "I spoke with my attorney. She says that recording you made might not even be admissible in court. North Carolina is complicated about that kind of thing. Your attorney is partially correct." Ernest replied calmly, "But even if the recording itself isn't admissible as evidence, I can testify about what I heard. And you'd have to testify too under oath and either perjure yourself or admit that yes, you were strategizing about when to file for divorce to maximize your financial benefit." Kelly's jaw tightened. "I was venting to a friend. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated for 3 months. Because that's how long you've been meeting with your divorce attorney, Kelly. I have the credit card statements. Lunch at that bistro near your lawyer's office every other Tuesday since mid-August. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Her face paled. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself," Ernest corrected. "There's a difference. You were planning to ambush me?" "Kelly, you were going to wait until you could maximize your payout, then hit me with papers when I least expected it. All I did was turn the tables." Kelly stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You humiliated me. Do you know what it felt like to have some stranger show up at my yoga class and serve me divorce papers in front of my students? I know what it felt like to hear my wife calculate the value of our marriage like it was a stock portfolio." Ernest replied quietly. "I know what it felt like to hear you tell your friend you stopped loving me a year ago, but stayed anyway for the money. So, yes, Kelly, I know what humiliation feels like." She spun around, and now there were tears streaming down her face, but Ernest couldn't tell if they were genuine or strategic. He'd thought he knew this woman. He'd been wrong about that. "What do you want?" Kelly asked, her voice breaking. "You clearly have all the power here. What's your end game?" Ernest pulled out a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. "This is a proposed settlement agreement. You can have your attorney review it, but the terms are non-negotiable." Kelly snatched up the folder, flipping through the pages. He watched her eyes scan the contents, watched her expression shift from anger to disbelief to rage. "This is insane," she said flatly. "You're offering me almost nothing." "I'm offering you exactly what you're entitled to by law," Ernest corrected. "We split the equity in the townhouse about 17,000 for each of us after we pay off the mortgage. You keep your car, I keep mine. We each keep our individual retirement accounts and investment accounts since we kept them separate throughout the marriage, and no alimony, given the documented evidence that you stayed in the marriage for financial strategy rather than affection or commitment. The judge will never agree to no alimony." Kelly protested. "I gave up career opportunities to support your work." Ernest raised an eyebrow. "You worked 15 hours a week teaching yoga." "Kelly, you worked 15 hours a week when we met. You didn't give up anything. You chose a part-time career that you enjoy, and I never pressured you to work more. In fact, I encouraged you to do what made you happy. I could have built a bigger client base. You could have." Ernest interrupted, "But you didn't. And that's not my responsibility. You're 31 years old, healthy, educated, and capable of supporting yourself. The recording proves you stayed in this marriage as a financial strategy. No judge is going to reward that with alimony." Kelly slammed the folder down on the table. "I won't sign this. Then we go to court," Ernest said simply, "and I present all my evidence and you explain to a judge why you hired a divorce attorney 3 months ago and were waiting for the 5-year mark to file. Your choice." They stared at each other across the kitchen table, the space between them filled with everything unsaid, everything broken. Finally, Kelly spoke, her voice cold. "I want you out of this house tonight." "Already planned on it," Ernest replied, standing. "I'll be back tomorrow with Marcus to get the rest of my things. My attorney will be in touch about the settlement timeline." He walked toward the door, then paused, turning back. "For what it's worth, Kelly, I really did love you. I thought we were building something real. I'm sorry you didn't feel the same way." She didn't respond, just stood there with her arms crossed, watching him leave. Ernest spent the weekend moving his belongings out of the townhouse. Market and another friend helped him load his furniture, his books, his clothes, all the accumulated pieces of a life he'd thought was permanent. Kelly wasn't there. She'd apparently gone to stay with Jessica, avoiding the whole process. On Monday morning, Patricia called with news. Kelly's attorney reached out. She said they want to negotiate. "What are they proposing?" 30,000 plus 2 years of limited alimony at 1,500 a month. "Essentially, they want you to pay her 66,000 total to go away quietly." Ernest felt anger flare in his chest. "She's not entitled to that." "I know," Patricia said calmly. "I told them our offer stands." But here's the interesting part. Her attorney mentioned that Kelly has been struggling. Apparently, the reality of her situation is setting in. What does that mean? It means that the life she thought she was going to fund with your money is evaporating. Patricia explained. She can't afford the townhouse on her own. She's going to have to move, probably into a small apartment. Her yoga income is around 2,000 a month, which in Charlotte isn't much. She built her whole exit strategy around walking away with a substantial nest egg. And now she's facing the reality of actually having to support herself on her own income. Ernest should have felt satisfaction at that, but mostly he just felt tired. So what happens now? We wait. She has to accept reality eventually. The recording is too damaging, and she knows it. The waiting was harder than Ernest had anticipated. He'd moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in the same general area, furnished it with the basics, and tried to settle into a new routine. Work became a refuge, at least there. Things made sense, had predictable outcomes, but everywhere he went, he saw pieces of his old life. The coffee shop where he and Kelly used to grab lattes on Sunday mornings, the hiking trail they'd walked dozens of times, the movie theater where they'd had their first date 6 years ago, when everything had seemed possible. It was Jessica, Kelly's friend, who finally broke the stalemate. 3 weeks after the papers had been served, Ernest got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Ernest, it's Jessica Miller, Kelly's friend." Ernest felt his defenses go up immediately. "What do you want, Jessica?" "I need to talk to you, not for Kelly, for me. Can we meet for coffee?" Against his better judgment, Ernest agreed. They met at a neutral cafe downtown, one he'd never been to with Kelly. Jessica looked terrible, tired, drawn, guilty. "I need to apologize," she said. Before Ernest had even sat down, "For my part in all of this." Ernest waited, saying nothing. "Kelly told you she stopped loving you a year ago." Jessica continued. "That's not true. Or at least it's not the whole truth. She was happy, Ernest, really happy, but She paused, her hands shaking around her coffee cup. I got divorced 2 years ago. Messy, awful divorce, but I walked away with 120,000 in settlement money, and I made the mistake of telling Kelly about it. Ernest felt something cold settle in his stomach. I didn't mean to plant ideas. Jessica rushed on. But I was bitter. I'd been married to my ex for 7 years, supported him through law school, and when he made partner at his firm, he left me for his paralegal. I felt like that settlement money was the only good thing that came out of those years, and I think I made Kelly start seeing her marriage to you through a financial lens. She's an adult, Ernest, he said quietly. She made her own choices. I know, but I encouraged her when she'd complain about you. And honestly, Ernest, they were normal complaints. You leave dishes in the sink sometimes. You fall asleep during movies. You're not the most romantic guy, normal stuff. But I'd say things like, well, at least he makes good money. Or you've put in 4 years, might as well see it through to 5. I turned her into this calculating person she wasn't before. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Ernest's situation. Ernest studied Jessica's face looking for deception, but all he saw was genuine remorse. Why are you telling me this? Because Kelly's falling apart, Jessica said bluntly. She's lost weight, she's not sleeping, she's barely working, and I realized that I helped destroy something that might have been fixable if I hadn't been pouring poison in her ear for the past year. She wasn't a gold digger, Ernest. She became one because I taught her to think that way. That doesn't change what she did, Ernest said. She still hired that attorney. She still made those calculations. She still stayed with me while planning to leave. I know, and she should face the consequences. I'm not asking you to take her back or anything like that. I just needed you to know that the Kelly you fell in love with was real. The person she became, I helped create that, and I'm sorry. Jessica left after that, and Ernest sat alone with his coffee trying to process what she'd told him. Could Kelly have been influenced? Absolutely, but that didn't erase her choices. Adults were responsible for their own decisions. Even when friends gave bad advice, still the conversation nagged at him. That night, Ernest did something he'd been avoiding. He went through old photos on his computer, pictures from their early years together. There was Kelly at their wedding, her smile radiant and genuine. Kelly laughing at a joke he'd made at Thanksgiving dinner. Kelly holding his hand during a sunset hike, looking at him like he was everything. When had that changed? When had she stopped seeing him as a partner and started seeing him as a meal ticket? His phone rang. Patricia Morrison, she's ready to sign. Patricia said without preamble. Kelly accepted the original settlement offer, no alimony, split the assets as proposed. Her attorney sent over the signed agreement this afternoon. Ernest felt a strange mix of relief and hollowness. That's good. When's it final? We can file with the court tomorrow. Given that you've been separated for over 30 days and there's an agreement in place, the judge will likely grant the divorce within a few weeks. Okay. Ernest said, do it. There's one more thing, Patricia added. Kelly included a personal note with the settlement agreement. I'm not supposed to show you this, but she paused. I think you should read it. She emailed him a scanned image. Ernest opened it on his phone. The note was handwritten. Kelly's familiar looping script. Ernest, I'm signing your settlement because you're right. I don't deserve alimony. I don't deserve anything from you except maybe your contempt. Jessica told me she talked to you. I didn't ask her to, but I'm glad she did because there's something I need you to understand. Even if you never forgive me, I did love you. I do love you. I just lost sight of what that meant. When Jessica told me about her divorce settlement, something broke in my brain. I started seeing our marriage as a safety net instead of a partnership. I started thinking about exit strategies instead of building a life. And by the time I realized how twisted my thinking had become, I was already meeting with attorneys and calculating numbers. You deserve better than that. You deserved someone who valued you for who you are, not what you could provide. I'm sorry I became someone who couldn't do that. I hope you find someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. And I hope someday I figure out how to be a better person than the one you discovered I'd become. Kelly Ernest read the note 3 times. It didn't change anything. It didn't erase the betrayal or the calculation or the fact that she'd stayed in their marriage as a strategy. But it did make him sad in a way he hadn't expected, because he believed she meant it. And that made everything worse somehow, knowing that the person she'd become wasn't who she'd wanted to be, but had become it anyway. He deleted the image and set his phone down. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in early December. Ernest didn't go to the courthouse. There was no hearing required since they'd both signed the settlement agreement. He just got an email from Patricia with a PDF attachment, the final divorce decree. He was officially single again, officially free, and officially done with the worst chapter of his life. But Kelly wasn't done facing consequences yet, and neither was Jessica, though she didn't know it yet. What happened next would change everything for both of them. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Ernest's life had settled into a new normal. He'd made his one-bedroom apartment actually feel like home, buying real furniture instead of the hastily acquired basics from the first few weeks. He'd started going to the gym regularly again, something he'd let slide during the final year of his marriage. He'd even gone on a few dates. Nothing serious, but enough to remind himself that connection was still possible. Work had become more than just a refuge. Ernest had thrown himself into a major campaign for his company, a regional healthcare initiative that required creative thinking and long hours. His boss had noticed 2 weeks ago she'd called him into her office and offered him a promotion to marketing director with a salary bump to $18,000. You've been doing director-level work for months anyway, she'd said. It's time we recognize that officially. Ernest had accepted, feeling something like pride for the first time in a long time. He was rebuilding slowly, deliberately, but rebuilding nonetheless. He hadn't heard from Kelly since the divorce was final, and he was fine with that. He'd blocked her on social media, though occasionally curiosity would make him unblock her temporarily just to see how she was doing. She'd moved into a small apartment on the east side of Charlotte, in a complex that looked okay, but unremarkable. Her yoga classes had apparently decreased. Her Instagram stories, which used to be daily, were now sporadic. She looked thinner in the photos, harder somehow, but she also looked determined. Ernest would unblock, look for 5 minutes, then block her again. It was a ritual he wasn't proud of, but he wasn't ready to completely disconnect either. It was Marcus who told him about Jessica. They were at a sports bar watching a basketball game when Marcus casually mentioned, "Hey, didn't your ex-wife have a friend named Jessica? Jessica Miller?" Ernest felt a familiar tension. "Yeah, why? I saw her at the grocery store last week. She looked rough, man. I didn't say anything, but she was crying in the parking lot. Thought you should know." Ernest frowned. "Why would I need to know that?" Marcus shrugged. "I don't know. She was part of that whole mess, right? But she also tried to make it right by telling you the truth. Just thought you'd care." The conversation bothered Ernest more than it should have. He tried to push it aside, but it lingered. Finally, after 3 days of thinking about it, he did something impulsive. He called Jessica. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice wary. "Ernest, yeah, can we talk?" They met at the same cafe where she'd apologized to him months ago. This time, Jessica looked even worse. Her eyes were hollow. Her hands shook slightly when she picked up her coffee. "Are you okay?" Ernest asked, surprising himself with the genuine concern in his voice. Jessica laughed bitterly. "Define. Okay, I'm alive. I'm employed, but otherwise not really. What happened?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then the whole story spilled out. After her conversation with Ernest, Jessica had been consumed with guilt about her role in Kelly's transformation. She'd started seeing a therapist, trying to work through her own bitterness about her divorce and how she'd projected that onto her friend. But the real problem had started when Kelly's ex-husband, Jessica's ex-husband's former law partner, had found out about Jessica's role in encouraging Kelly's divorce strategy. My ex Trevor, he and Kelly's attorney know each other professionally, Jessica explained. Word got around about what happened with you and Kelly, about the recording, the strategy, all of it. Trevor called me last month and told me he's reopening our divorce settlement. Ernest felt his stomach drop. Can he do that? Apparently, yes, in certain circumstances. He's claiming I misrepresented my intentions during our divorce, that I told the court I wanted to reconcile when I was actually strategizing with an attorney about maximizing my payout. She paused. Which is true. I did the same thing I encouraged Kelly to do. I hired a divorce attorney 6 months before I told Trevor I wanted a divorce. I positioned myself strategically, and now he has evidence. What evidence? Text messages. I texted Kelly about my strategy while I was still married to Trevor. Things like playing the long game and making sure I get what I owed. Trevor's attorney subpoenaed my phone records as part of the reopening, and they found everything. Jessica's hands were really shaking now. Ernest, they could claw back a significant portion of my settlement, maybe all of it, and I've already spent a lot of it on my apartment, my car, a trip to Europe I took last year. I could end up in debt. Serious debt. Ernest sat back in his chair processing this. Part of him, the part that was still angry about what Jessica had done, felt a grim satisfaction. This was karma, pure and simple. Another part of him, the part that was trying to move forward rather than stay mired in bitterness, felt something closer to pity. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Jessica looked up, surprised. You're sorry? Why would you be sorry? Because what you did was wrong, but what you're facing seems disproportionate. And because you at least tried to make it right by telling me the truth. That counts for something. Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. I don't deserve your compassion. I helped destroy your marriage. My marriage was destroyed the moment Kelly decided to see me as a financial asset instead of a partner. Ernest, he corrected gently, you influenced that, yes. But Kelly made her choices. Adults are responsible for their own decisions even when friends give bad advice. They sat in silence for a while, both processing the messy reality of consequences and responsibility. What are you going to do? Ernest finally asked. Jessica wiped her eyes. Fight it, I guess. Get a lawyer? Try to prove that even though my intentions were mercenary, the original settlement was still fair based on the marriage's actual circumstances. But honestly, I think I'm going to lose. And maybe I should. Nobody deserves to be bankrupted. Ernest said, maybe not. But I helped teach Kelly to treat marriage like a business transaction, and I did the same thing to my own husband. Maybe this is just the universe making sure I understand exactly how much damage that kind of thinking causes. Ernest left the cafe feeling unsettled. Jessica's situation was a stark reminder that consequences ripple outward in ways we can't always predict or control. That evening, he did something he hadn't done in weeks. He unblocked Kelly on social media and sent her a direct message. Need to talk? It's about Jessica. Kelly replied within 5 minutes. What about her? They agreed to meet for coffee the next day. It would be their first face-to-face interaction since the divorce was finalized. Ernest saw her waiting when he arrived at the cafe. She looked different, thinner, yes, but also somehow more present, less distracted. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. Hi, she said softly when he sat down. Hi. They ordered coffee in awkward silence. Then Ernest explained Jessica's situation. The reopened settlement, the text messages, the potential financial devastation. Kelly's face went pale. Oh my God. I didn't know, she didn't tell me. I think she was too ashamed. Ernest said, but here's the thing, Kelly. Jessica influenced you, but you made the ultimate decision to treat our marriage the way you did. And now she's facing consequences that seem worse than what you faced. That doesn't seem right. Kelly was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe you could provide a statement for her case. Explain that while she gave you advice, you were ultimately responsible for your own choices. That she wasn't some mastermind manipulator. She was a bitter friend venting, and you chose to take that venting as a blueprint. Would that help her case? I don't know. Maybe. It might show that her influence was less calculated than Trevor's attorney is claiming. Kelly studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Why do you care? Jessica helped ruin our marriage. Because carrying around anger and bitterness about what happened is exhausting. Ernest replied honestly, and because revenge isn't the same thing as justice. Jessica doesn't deserve to be destroyed financially for giving bad advice. Even if that advice was really bad, Kelly nodded slowly. I'll do it. I'll write a statement. Thank you. They sipped their coffee in silence for a minute, and then Kelly spoke again. I started therapy 3 weeks ago, she said quietly. I'm trying to figure out how I became the person who could do what I did to us. That's good, Ernest said and meant it. My therapist says I have issues with security. That, growing up with parents who fought constantly about money, made me hyper-focused on financial stability to the point where it overrode everything else. That I started seeing relationships as transactions because that's how my parents' marriage functioned. I didn't know that about your parents, Ernest said. I never told you. I was ashamed of it. But the therapist says that shame drove me to overcompensate by trying to secure myself financially, even at the expense of emotional connection. Ernest absorbed this. It didn't excuse what Kelly had done, but it did provide context. Are you doing okay financially? He asked. Kelly gave a small, sad smile. I'm getting by. I picked up more yoga classes, and I'm teaching a couple of corporate wellness sessions each week. It's tight, but I'm managing. And weirdly, I think I'm happier, or at least more honest with myself. I'm not living some fantasy life I built up in my head. I'm just living. That's something, Ernest said. It is. Kelly paused. Ernest, I know my apology note didn't change anything, but I want you to know that I'm really genuinely sorry. Not just for what I did, but for who I became. You deserved better than that, Ernest said simply. But I also want you to know something. I forgive you. Kelly's eyes widened. What? I forgive you, not because what you did was okay. It wasn't. Not because I want to get back together. I don't. But because I don't want to carry that anger around anymore. Forgiving you is for me, not for you. Tears streamed down Kelly's face. I don't deserve that. Probably not, but I'm giving it anyway. They talked for another hour, not about logistics or lawyers or settlements, but about life. Kelly told him about the new meditation practice she'd started. Ernest told her about his promotion. They talked about Marcus' upcoming wedding and whether Panthers would ever win another playoff game. It wasn't the conversation of a married couple, but it wasn't the conversation of enemies either. It was something else. Two people who had once shared life, acknowledging that while that life was over, they could both still move forward. When they parted ways, Kelly gave him a quick, awkward hug. Thank you, she whispered, for forgiving me, for trying to help Jessica. Take care of yourself, Kelly, Ernest replied. You too. True to her word, Kelly provided a detailed statement for Jessica's case. She explained the context of Jessica's advice, acknowledged her own role in choosing to act on it, and made clear that Jessica was not the architect of Kelly's divorce strategy. Just a bitter friend who'd vented about her own experiences, combined with Ernest's testimony, which Patricia helped him prepare, focusing on Jessica's eventual honesty and remorse. The statement helped Jessica's case significantly. The judge ultimately decided not to claw back the entire settlement, but did reduce it by $35,000, which Jessica would have to repay over time. It wasn't a complete victory, but it wasn't total devastation either. Jessica reached out to Ernest afterward. Her text message was simple. Thank you for giving me a chance at redemption. I won't waste it. 3 months later, Ernest was at Marcus' wedding when he saw someone across the room who made him pause. A woman about his age with warm eyes and an easy smile talking animatedly with the bride. "Who is that?" he asked Marcus. "That's the bride's cousin, Sarah. She's a physical therapist. Just moved to Charlotte from Raleigh." "Want me to introduce you?" Ernest hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, I think I do." As Marcus led him across the room, Ernest felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not hope that he'd find another Kelly, or that this woman would be the one. Just simple, quiet hope that good things could still happen, that life could still surprise him in positive ways, that sometimes after everything falls apart, you get a chance to build something new, something better, something real. The lesson Ernest learned wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was simpler and more profound. People will reveal who they really are when tested. Some will fail that test spectacularly. Some will fail but find a way to grow from it. And some will surprise you by choosing honesty and growth over self-protection. The key was knowing which was which, protecting yourself accordingly, but also leaving room for the possibility of change in others and, most importantly, in yourself. Kelly had taught him what he wouldn't accept in a relationship. Jessica had taught him about the complexity of influence and responsibility. And his own experience had taught him that sometimes the most satisfying ending isn't revenge. It's letting go, moving forward, and building something better with the lessons you've learned. 6 months after his divorce, Ernest Morris was dating someone who saw him for who he was. He'd advanced in his career, he'd maintained his dignity while protecting his interests. He'd forgiven the people who'd hurt him, not because they'd earned it, but because he deserved peace. And Kelly, she was teaching yoga, going to therapy, and slowly rebuilding a life based on authenticity rather than calculation. She'd learned the hard way that treating relationships as transactions leaves you bankrupt in ways that matter most. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming a better version of yourself, while others deal with the consequences of their own choices. Ernest had tested his wife and discovered a painful truth. But in facing that truth, documenting it, and protecting himself, he'd ultimately freed both of them to become better people than they'd been together. That was worth more than any settlement. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.